Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of the Atheist Experience. I'm your host, Matt Dillahunty. Joining me this week, Martin Wagner. Swapping dates with Jen and throwing off everybody who looked at the calendar there.
He did that on purpose.
Yeah, it was cool. We are a live public access television program. Today's Sunday, November 21st, 2010. I'll make the announcements as short as possible because we want to get to live calls. As a matter of fact, we'll get the number up for you. And for those of you who are used to watching the show, when we were in the smaller studio and before the shrinking of the show down to an hour, the telephone numbers changed as well. Somebody's already found it because the light's already blinking. But if you want to find out more about the atheist community of Austin, the sponsors of this program, you can go to www.atheist-community.org. And in addition to this program, the ACA also sponsors an internet podcast called The Nonprofits. You can go to nonprofitsradio.com for more information. That's Prophets. We were live yesterday. Schilling joined us. He drove down and was here for other reasons, and he went to the debate between Christopher Hitchens and William Dembski in Plano and came down to talk about it. So yesterday's Nonprofits is exceptionally long. It's like a 2-hour and some change show.
Oh, okay. It's like one of the ones I did.
Yeah, so it's up there for those people who want to check that out. I don't know, we got technical issues already. So anyway, in addition to our media outreach efforts, the ACA also produces a number of social events throughout the week, including Atheist Happy Hour on Thursdays at the Dog and Duck, and a morning brunch at Romeo's, and a lecture series on the first Sunday of the month, etc. You can find all that stuff on our calendar and the sidebar of the main page of the website. And after this program's over, everybody involved tends to get together and go to Threadgill's. Everybody goes, not go. Threadgill's, 301 West Riverside Drive. I'm faster than the people who are putting up the little things at the bottom there.
That's okay.
The show's on until 5:30, and we'll be over there around 6 o'clock or so. Any atheist or atheist-friendly person is welcome to come to any of our events. You don't have to be a member to attend. But if you're coming down to preach, proselytize, or provoke, please don't. Just pick up the phone, which also starts with a P, and give us a call. And we can go ahead and put the number up for people. I know we've got at least one person on hold. One quick announcement for people in the Austin area. We are restarting Godless Gamers in the very near future. For those who aren't aware, this is an activity the ACA used to do that we had to put on hiatus for a while because we didn't have a location for it. Where anybody interested in playing board games, and some of them are deep strategy games. Some of them are card games. Some of them are party games.
Whatever anybody wants to play, really.
Yeah. Whoever shows up picks out what games they're going to play. We're going to start doing that again at our house. And what I need to know is if you're interested in doing Godless Gamers on Monday nights, that's when we'll be doing it, feel free to give me an email. You can either use the TV at atheist-community.org. But it'd probably be better to use the president at atheist-community.org because that way I don't flood the TV list with people wanting to play games. So.
Yeah.
All right. Welcome, Martin.
Thank you very much.
All 4 lines are now flashing.
Well,
so.
I think it's, you've had a very busy week, and I think maybe some people want to talk to you about it.
Oh, I don't know. This is about something else already, but we can get started if you're ready.
No, let's do that.
All right.
Yeah, right
We've
ahead.
got Dan in Detroit. How are you?
Great, Matt. How are you?
Fine.
Good. If I knew Martin was going to be on, I would have gave my name as the King of Pimp. I had no idea he was going to be there. It was some show. Anyway, Matt, I was just calling to update you on something. A little while back, you had a caller. They claimed to have psychic abilities. And I think you and Jeff were hosting that day, and you told them to contact the James Randi Foundation.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, one night, just looking around, I was looking at the James Randi Foundation, and number 12, like under the rules to qualify, you have to be famous. You have to have a media presence and also a signed letter by an academic, so it's not open to the general public.
Sure. It is kind of, it used to be open to everybody. This was a change, and they changed it because there are just too many people that we're essentially wasting time on. Any Yahoo who claims I can, telepathically make my flowers sprout pixies or things like that. So this requirement doesn't really limit anybody. I mean, if somebody can actually do what they say they can do, it should be pretty trivial to get a news story done about it or some other kind of press. It's just because we have 6 billion people on the planet and we can't possibly expect them to. We want to filter out to the best possible claims, and those that have media coverage are the ones.
Yeah, agreed. Like if Yuri Geller came around again, as soon as they get that well known, Sylvia Brown,
Yeah, it doesn't have to be. I mean, you don't have to be super well known or anything. It's just the specific restriction is they must satisfy two conditions. They must either have a media presence, which means being published, written about, etc., in regard to their claims and powers, and they must produce at least one signed document from an academic who witnessed it. The number of academics who are willing to sign shit saying that they saw something amazing is overwhelming.
Higher than you would think.
It's the reason why we have all these, woo claims about alternative medicines.
Yeah. Because academia
I
pays,
imagine I could walk downtown and find a doctor that'd sign almost anything I wanted right now.
Academia pays so much. Appearing on Oprah pays a slightly different grade. Yeah. So
cool. But yeah, thanks for that clarification, because it's not like anybody can just call now. You'll have to actually do a little bit of legwork and make some kind of demonstration before you can fill out the application. So.
All right, thanks, guys. Hope to see you in a couple years. I'll make a trip down to Texas.
Great. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. We've got Jacob in Chickasha,
Oklahoma.
Hello, am I good?
You're good.
You're on.
Okay, cool. Well, I've kind of grown up in Christian society my entire life. I went to school at a private school in Norman, and now I'm in college, obviously, and I've kind of discovered this whole secular life, right?
Right.
And beforehand, I've been engrossed in this Christian culture, and I've had to kind of learn how to deal with other people differing from my opinion. And it's been a really complex friendship.
Well,
So I've approached this a many number of ways. Argumentation never really worked for me.
So I'm confused. Which side of the
that's what I was wondering. Like
friendship are you on?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm the atheist side.
Oh,
Okay. And you're having trouble relating to Christian friends.
I heard you guys' thing about skepticon and confrontation versus
Accommodation.
accommodation. And I'm kind of in between on this because I haven't really been exposed to a situation where argumentation really works.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's okay. Here's the best thing I can tell you, and that is when I have conversations with people on the phone here, it's one sort of environment, and it's generally dictated by the tone they take or how willing they are to have an honest discussion. If you watch, like on Tuesday, I did a formal debate at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. Thanks, guys. That was awesome. And that was a different forum. And so there was a different style there. There was no reason, and it wouldn't have been productive to get anybody's face. I also have friends and family member who are theists of one stripe or another, or who disagree on something at some point. And there's a different style for that. I mean, the situation dictates what is or isn't appropriate. Now, my family, for the most part, we just don't talk about it anymore. And it's primarily because they're uncomfortable and ill-equipped to deal with the responses that I give. And so we just tend to avoid the religion subject pretty much as possible. I don't have a lot of close Christian friends outside of my family. There are a handful of acquaintances and there's a couple of close friends, but they're kind of liberal, moderate, nondescript. The subject of religion doesn't really affect anything about their life or our interaction. So how to do it, I mean, I find it very difficult to believe that I could be a really close friend with somebody who's a fundamentalist. There's just such a strict, what do we have in common?
Yeah.
And if you can find what you have in common, that's of course what I'd say build on.
Yeah, and it comes down to also a matter of if the problem that you are experiencing is that you're finding it difficult now to just converse with maybe friends you've had for a long time who are still Christian and you're no longer Christian, or maybe you're meeting new people in your college environment who are Christian and you're just trying to figure out how to communicate, and treat it like any sort of ordinary conversation. Start by asking one another questions. Just leave it as a very open and unthreatening exchange, whereas argumentation, you're immediately jumping into some sort of, well, that may not necessarily be the sort of thing that most people would want to find themselves confronted with if you're like, whoa, hey, I'm just talking, right?
Yeah,
so,
you're totally right.
Yeah, so somebody, just so if you have a Christian that you know at school or somebody that you've known from your past, and and they're like, well, why don't you believe in God? And then you can answer, and then you can ask them, well, what is it that you believe that you find, and why do you believe those things? That's always, I think, a very good one.
I think that's a bit too direct, personally. Yeah. I think that this needs to be a little bit more cloak and dagger. You need to be exposed in their daily life, and you kind of need to modernize them.
Yeah, and again, I mean, it's like it doesn't really have to. I mean, if it has to come up, if this is just a subject that they really want to discuss with you, then it's, as Matt said, your situation is going to determine how that conversation flows. I don't think that you should maybe go into these conversations thinking that, I have to structure this somehow differently than if we were going to discuss, what was on, television last night, or what happened in the news this morning, or what have you. If you want to make it a general topic of conversation, and that, I think, in a lot of ways, can create a very comfortable, neutral environment where religion just becomes another aspect of your life experience that you can talk about, in addition with other things. And
I try to treat it like a music discussion or maybe an art kind of thing.
Well, I'd be careful about turning it into something that's just a personal preference, like whether you like blue versus purple, because that's not what we're talking about.
Yeah.
In fact, we're
those
talking
aren't
about
claim issues.
the nature
but
of
in order
reality.
To make it non-confrontational.
Mm-hmm.
I don't go out of my. I just pretty much approach things fairly honestly. I have some friends who are Christians, and we're friends. We don't actually spend much time talking about it. On the rare occasions when it comes up, I'm honest, and my friends generally appreciate the fact that I'm honest. They wouldn't be my friends. I mean, I tend to surround myself with people who can at least appreciate the fact that I'm not going to, pretend and nod my head along when I hear something that I think is BS. So, on the other hand, not everybody's like that.
Yeah.
Yep.
And if you're uncomfortable, again, about being the one to maybe cause offense or something, then just let them take the lead in the whole thing, right? Let them ask whatever they want to ask of you.
Yeah, respond with questions, and the kind of Socratic method is going to end up being more productive than many others in a lot of cases. So
yeah, and as long as the outcome of the whole thing is that they end up with the idea that regardless of your differences in belief, you're still Jacob, right? Then it's all good. And that's probably the easiest way to sort of defuse any way in which they may feel threatened. Or uncomfortable with just the topic, or uncomfortable with you because suddenly they realize, he's not a believer anymore, and that makes him different somehow.
And that
doesn't really make you
change
different.
Of perspective.
Yeah.
It can totally change the nature of the relationship.
Yeah.
And on that note, Jacob, there's actually another caller who may have another take on this. So unless you had a follow-up, I'll go ahead and jump over there and we'll find out what they had to say about this.
My last word is, wow, this is really quick how the dialogue is. I really wasn't prepared for that, but thank you for taking my call.
Well, I'll slow down a little bit, but you're very welcome. And part of it's because we're rushed because of the new format. So, but thanks a lot for calling.
Take care.
Bye.
Yeah, as a reminder, the show's been knocked down from 90 minutes to an hour. So
it has.
We're doing what we can to get as much in, which is why, when Martin's here, we don't bother with the topic. We just go straight to calls.
Well, I'm just lazy, though.
And the biggest problem is actually for me to figure out which camera to look at now, which I've messed up about 20 times in the past few minutes. But we've got Hunter in Williston.
Am I on?
You're on, Hunter.
Hey, guys. It's great to get through. First-time caller. Recently, big fan of your show.
Thanks.
Like what you guys do.
Thanks much.
I had a couple of quick questions maybe could resolve quickly, and then one kind of idea that me and my friend were tumbling around. The first question I have is about agnosticism. It seems to me when I hear agnosticism, it's more of a religious view as far as I can't prove God, therefore I don't believe he exists until he's proved. And my perception of it was before is more of a philosophical argument saying God, the idea of God can't be proven, and that's the only position. That's my take on agnosticism. God, because of his definition, he can't be proven, but you could still be Christian or atheist or theist and be agnostic at the same time.
Okay.
Am I incorrect?
There's theism and atheism tend to relate to what you believe or say you believe, and Gnosticism and agnosticism tend to relate to what you know. But knowledge is a subset of belief. It's a confusing mess. I find there's different categories of agnostics for different reasons. Some of these are, I've already talked. You'll find a clip where I've railed against a particular type of agnostic. My thing is, I don't hold to the idea that that some would say that God is that there's no way to prove this. Mm-hmm. Now, for many of the gods and many of the claims about gods, they are by their definition untestable or unfalsifiable, and therefore, yeah, you're never gonna get there. So it's not so much this issue of not being able to prove it that bothers me. It's the issue that a lot of agnostics present, where they claim that you could never know that this is something that is an assertion that I don't see the justification for. It's one thing to say we don't know. It's a whole different thing to say we could never know.
Yeah, because that's an unfounded claim.
Yeah, when they use that to say, well, I'm not an atheist because I'm an agnostic.
Yeah.
It drives me crazy because there's a great big error there.
And those people tend to use the word agnostic simply because they are afraid of the word atheist. There's something about that scares them.
Right.
And so it's like one of my friends described to me as an agnostic is an atheist with a foot in the door. And that's the kind of agnostic that we tend to come down really hard on. The long and short of it is that, yeah, you don't have to claim knowledge of a thing to decide that you believe it may be true or believe it may not be true. You often make the analogy to legal cases where there is a possibility of a defendant being innocent or guilty, and until all the evidence is, you don't know which of those is actually the case. However, you may, based upon whatever a bias is or whatever you have seen so far in the way of evidence, or just a gut feeling or this, that, or the other that you may have, you may believe that the defendant is guilty or not guilty.
Right.
But you don't know yet. And eventually you will know, depending on where the evidence
never
goes.
know.
Yeah.
Depending on how you're going to define knowledge, as to how certain one has to be to claim knowledge. And so I find it largely irrelevant, which is why one of the things we end up doing is asking somebody, tell us what you believe and why. Because I care what you believe, your beliefs inform your actions, and I care why. Because you can believe things for good reasons or bad reasons.
Mm-hmm. And it's up to the believer to pretty much define what it is he believes in before we can say whether or not we believe in it too. Otherwise, we don't really know what it is that we're trying to refute or not.
Yeah, I had somebody send me a message the other day basically saying, can you tell me what about God you don't believe in? And I had to explain, it's kind of silly for me to list all of the things that I don't believe in. And it's also silly for me to define God, because the second I say, okay, here's a definition of God and I don't believe it, what's the response going to be? Every single time it's going to be, well, that's not the God I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So instead, just tell me the God you're talking about and why you believe it, and we can work from there, instead of wasting all that time doing circles about, forcing me to define something.
All right. And my point that was supposed to be a little longer than that one, I guess, was me and my friend were talking about sympathy, and it came to my mind that if you can rationalize why someone believes a certain thing, then you would have to accept that idea as a rational idea.
No, because rationalization and rationality are not exactly the same. Like, you can rationalize your choice to believe in a thing, but that doesn't mean that it is a rational belief, if you know what I mean.
Well, maybe I stated it wrong.
Semantic, hair splitting there, but
right. If it's rational, or it's not rational, but if you can,
someone may believe something. Someone may believe something that is patently false, but they believe it with complete conviction, either because they have there's some psychological and emotional need driving them,
Right.
Like, oh, your spouse has been diagnosed with terminal cancer and they're going to die in 6 months. No, that can't happen, right? They'll be in denial, or this, or they may have some sort of ideological opposition to whatever it is. They can believe something and have a whole laundry list of reasons that they think are really good reasons why they don't or do believe in the particular claim, but that doesn't mean that any of that's valid.
Right. That's not what I was trying to get at. It was more about it wasn't about fact and truth as far as reason. I'm just saying if you can look at someone's circumstance and say the decision that they chose is rational given
it's not
what you know about it.
Okay, I think you might be confusing rational with
understandable.
Or valuable.
I mean rational is in the chain of events. Like if they're born in the Deep South, then it's rational to say that
it's not.
Are Southern Christian.
No, it's not. It's understandable that somebody born into a family of Christians would adopt Christianity.
Right.
That doesn't make it rational. That's the difference.
No, I meant how you approach that is rational. The chain that you follow is a rational progression of what you are witnessing.
It may be be the logical end result of something, but again, those reasons may still not be rational reasons. I think that you're conflating definitions of things.
Yeah, this is why I went with understandable instead of rational. It is completely understandable that this might be that this would be the direction someone would go based on the influences, but it doesn't make their position rational.
I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
I understand. And if I can get one more little quick question, and it's just because you guys know about logical fallacies. And I've seen this on your show a lot. Someone brings up an argument that, for example, well, you weren't there when Jesus was crucified, and a clear rebuttal is, well, neither were you.
Right.
Is there a label for that type of useless argument that they bring to the table? Is there a name?
I don't know. I don't know that it's in. I mean, in logical terms, basically, they're just making an assertion that would necessarily be a flawed premise. I don't know that you would need to label it beyond that. Vapid, useless.
Well, wouldn't it just be sort of like assuming the truth of your conclusion? It's begging the question is one where you.
It may not necessarily be circular at all.
Yeah.
And honestly, I don't really care if there was a specific term. I mean, I'm fine with actually. And one of the things I'd like to change because I've been doing this for 5 years or so, is that, and somebody brought this up in an email, and thank you for doing that, is that occasionally somebody will call in and we'll just say, oh, well, that's, circular reasoning, or that's an argument from ignorance, and just identify the fallacy without actually explaining what we're talking about. So in the future, I may take another second or two to explain what we're talking about. And it's a good time to point out that when we talk about an argument from ignorance, we're not saying that somebody's stupid. The specifics of an argument from ignorance are such that because you cannot demonstrate that I'm wrong, therefore I'm justified in believing that I'm right. It's the you can't disprove God thing.
It's because we as the human race are ignorant of the facts about a particular thing. Therefore, I am justified in just making up my own solution to this thing. No,
but the you weren't there
could be a non sequitur.
It's yes.
Yeah, because it's got nothing to your presence at a thing. It has nothing to do with whether or not the thing actually happened or not.
It won't be a non sequitur because that would apply to conclusion. But now I'm nitpicking.
All right. Well,
but it's a flawed premise to say you weren't there, therefore you can't say anything about it. It's just nonsense.
Right. Well, that's all. The only questions I have, because I generally agree with pretty much everything you guys say. So
then you're generally right.
We like you. Yeah.
Well, thanks, and I'll try to give you guys a go again if I get another topic to talk about.
All right, great.
Take care.
Thanks a lot, Hunter.
Okay.
We have full lines. We do almost full because Hunter left the gap. Which I want to. Is it going to be 1, 2, 3? Nope, not quite full yet. The number's up. As a reminder, after the show's over, we get together and go to dinner at Fred Gill's, 301 West Riverside Drive. We're only on for like 35 more minutes. That's how fast
yes.
this show goes. So we're just going to keep on trucking.
So we should, keep on
calls.
keeping on.
By the way, I do want to mention, even if we don't actually get around to talking to it in detail, the debate that I mentioned that I did on Tuesday at UMBC is available online, and Martin was kind enough to, at atheistexperience.blogspot.com, there's a thread about it, which is, I don't know, got like 200 comments on it now.
Yeah.
And then Catherine
But it's still going, yeah. Catherine, who's been great.
Who's been a
giving us
workhorse.
the embed codes and everything, yeah.
It's so the entire playlist is now up there in all 9 parts, and you can see the good, the bad, and the ugly from both sides.
Yes, and boy, the ugly is pretty ugly.
Well, you know.
I mean, that guy was a piece of work.
So we got Lee in Richmond. How are you?
Hi guys. Longtime fan. I'm a former Southern Independent Baptist preacher turned atheist.
You got the accent for it.
Now, I'm a libertarian, and I do find myself to be kind of an outcast in my own community, especially in
and deservedly so. No, I'm teasing.
Yeah, believe me. There is a politically correct way that a lot of atheists are tiptoeing around Islam these days. Most of the broadcasters are really, they'll attack anyone who comments against like Ayan Hirsi Ali. She's one of the most bravest people in the world.
Hey, Lee?
Opinion. Huh?
I'm wondering. You said there were atheists are tiptoeing around Islam.
Oh, definitely.
Like who?
Yeah, who's doing that?
Well, I mean, I heard the nonprofits recently, and they're talking about the Ground Zero Mosque issue, and
that would have been
I mean, they were going right after. I mean, they were attacking pretty firmly.
And Sam Harris,
ignorant Tea Partiers.
Hang on a second.
They must be. That's what they must be. Because that's the only people in the world who could possibly oppose this mosque.
Hang on, Lee. Let me explain, because that was the show that I hosted with my friends Gia and Chris, and
Yes.
let me clarify what the position was on that. Because I think we were extremely clear on the show. We're not fans of mosques or churches or any kinds of religious buildings, but there's a question here of one group's constitutional rights. First off, this is an organization of American Muslims, which you have a right to be in this country, and just like you have your right to be Christian or Hindu or Baha'i or whatever. And if you want to build, if you own property and you want to build a place of worship on it or a community center or what have you, you get to do that. And what we were responding to is essentially this attempt by people who, again, are coming from the Tea Party side, are coming from the far right, who, for one thing, are painting with this very broad brush this whole sort of, Islam was responsible for 9/11, therefore, these are the same people, and they're not really. And that was the point that we were making. It's like when some Christian wacko decides to blow up an abortion clinic, every Christian in that community isn't responsible for that crime. Okay.
Yeah, well,
just
I can make an analogy on this.
Yeah.
Now, if Fred Phelps wanted to build a chapel as close as possible to the spot where Matthew Shepard was killed, we'd see through it. We'd call him on it. Atheists, we'd call him the jerk that he is. But there is political correctness. We can't say that about Islam.
Lee, your analogy is horribly flawed, because in this case, Fred Phelps is an individual.
Well, let's say the Westboro
that
Baptist
you're directly objecting to, whereas building an Islamic community center blocks from Ground Zero is not the same thing as what you're talking about. And by the way, Fred Phelps may in fact have the right to do that as long as he buys the land.
Right. They have the right to, but
hang on.
Pretty good about seeing through deceptions.
Hang on. It does. Your initial claim that atheists are somehow taking it easy on Islam, I find is absolute utter nonsense, because we're all. Not only has it not been the case from any prominent outspoken atheist, from Pat Condell right all through Dawkins and the rest of them down, directly attacking Islam, and Sam Harris doing it just the other day, but it's gotten so prominent that Ray Comfort, who once upon a time used to say, hey, you guys are afraid to go after Islam, is now posting on his blog saying, hey, I wish you atheists would stop going after Islam because it's dangerous. So I don't accept the premise that atheists are somehow soft on Islam. And if your reason for that is because of positions regarding the mosque, then you've missed the point entirely, because the mosque has nothing to do with our position on Islam.
Yeah, the discussion that we were having on the nonprofits,
it's a matter of law.
The discussion that we were having on the nonprofits regarding the Park 51 construction had to do with the constitutional rights of this particular group of American Muslims. It had nothing to do with our agreement or disagreement or our liking or disliking of Islam as a religion.
But
Nothing
would
whatsoever.
you speak out if Fred Phelps wanted to build a chapel near where Matthew Shepard was killed?
No.
No.
You wouldn't call him a jerk for
I would,
jerk?
A jerk. I'd call him a jerk, but I won't say. And because I think he is a jerk, he can't be allowed to build his building.
No, he's allowed to, you see, there's a lot of liberals who don't want to believe that Muslim leaders can have an agenda too. I mean, they'll call a Christian.
Well,
again,
what does that have to?
He's obviously got an agenda like intelligent design. We knew that was an attempt to get the Bible back into classrooms.
No, it's not.
Well, it's.
See, you're extending and overgeneralizing. First of all, the people who are building the mosque are not necessarily the same people that you would identify with an agenda that relates to 9/11. They're just not. And so by conflating the two, and then you shift to Fred Phelps, well, that is the individual with an agenda. That's why I said your analogy doesn't work. In one case, Lee, we have a person who is demonstrably trying to make a statement, and in the other case, we have people who are trying to build a civic center.
Well, even the supporters call it a mosque. I've seen the 60-minute episode.
I don't give a rat's ass if it was a mosque.
It can be a mosque.
It can be a mosque.
Yeah. And Imam Rauf still calls it. He calls it Cordoba House. He doesn't call it Park 51.
Well, I don't care.
Again, what does it matter?
But there's people are still defending it.
Because you should be defended.
They have the right to build it.
They have the right to build it, but is it okay? So it's impossible that Muslims.
Are you aware? Are you aware that there are mosques closer to Ground Zero currently?
I know there's one 4 blocks away.
So what is the objection? Because whether it's a mosque or community center, it is farther away than one is nearer.
Well, I'm just saying that if I still make the Fred Phelps analogy because it's an in your face. We know it's an in your face.
You make the Fred Phelps analogy because it seems to support your point, which is fatuous.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know that it is an in your face. You assume that it is.
I will tell you all day long.
We don't know Fred Phelps will be doing it as an in your face. We don't know he'd be doing it, but
your analogy sets it up that he would be.
Yeah,
you can't be that dumb about that.
The assumption that
we'd have to be dumb to not see through his agenda. But
I tell you what, I'm almost not dumb enough. Never mind. Go ahead.
Again, you are making an assumption about the motives behind building the Cordoba House / Park 51 / whatever the hell.
Right. Fred Phelps wanted to build the chapel. I also say,
my God, Lee, I swear I'm going to hang up.
Dude,
I swear I'm going to hang up in a second.
Okay, screw Phelps. He's got nothing to do with this discussion. We're talking about this particular construction.
It does illustrate where
no, it doesn't illustrate anything.
You're on hold.
It illustrates the fact that you are making a false analogy in order to make a point, claiming that there is a motive behind the Park 51 construction that is intentionally confrontational and anti-American and designed to be a form of, political provocation. And there is no basis for that. In fact, the mosques that are in that same area, in the same Ground Zero neighborhood, have for a long time, in fact, been attempting to expand because, this has been a construction that's been planned for some time. So there's no basis. This is the same question that was asked to me of someone on Facebook when we were having this whole discussion, when this was a big controversy back in the summer. They said, well, would you be happy if, first off, I'm not happy with the construction of churches or mosques or anything. I don't generally support religion as on principle. But, they said, well, how would you feel if a church decided to build in a lot that was right next to an abortion clinic that had been bombed? And I would say, my answer was the same with Park 50. How I feel about it is irrelevant. If that is a church that owns that land as private U.S. citizens, they've got the right to build on it. Now, if it happens to be located next to this event, does that prove that these same people, you're making a composition fallacy. There's a guilt by association fallacy where because one group of Muslims did a thing for a specific set of political reasons, every other Muslim bears guilt, collective guilt for that crime. That is what is behind the objections to the construction of Park 51.
Yeah, if you want to fix your analogy, instead of going with Fred Phelps building up next to Matthew Shepard, pick a random Baptist church and do it.
Yeah. So Fred Phelps is special. He's
my God, you're being thick.
Yeah,
I said replace Fred Phelps in your analogy. Hang on, I said replace
Fred. Why are you opposed to Fred Phelps though? I mean, he is probably the most outspoken jerk of the religious right.
And does he represent every Baptist alive?
No, he doesn't.
So
Okay.
if Fred Phelps protested at something, right, and then a week later, an entirely different Baptist church came along and said, and there's at a lot 200 yards away from where that protest took place, said, "We want to put up a church here." Are you going to be up in arms and say, "Oh, I see through your agenda. You're one of those sneaky Baptists, just like Mr. Fred Phelps"?
Well, being a former Baptist, actually, I would say yeah, because they would look.
Then you're an idiot.
Now, I don't know if you've noticed this, but there is a lot of people who will apologize for the extreme actions of the extremist wing. They'll say, "Well, yeah, it's wrong that they did that, but you got to understand why they did it," and they'll apologize for it. Now, Imam Rauf, he did say he threatened violence if the Park 51 Cordoba house.
No, he
was
never
moved.
did.
No, he didn't.
No, he did
the
not.
Islamic world would explode with violence. Now,
That's not a threat.
That's not a threat.
My-
That's-
Now suppose.
All right.
the chapel's
How about
being
you
built.
get your news from news sources instead of conspiracy sources? And how about you actually think about this? Because you constructed a horribly flawed analogy, and when we point it out, you just keep coming back to it. And also, your entire point is irrelevant because what we've said, first of all, is that our position on the mosque has nothing to do with, is no relation to our position on Islam. We are actually being objective in our assessment here because I would personally rather never see another church built for the rest of my life, church, civic center, mosque, whatever, for the rest of my life. I'd rather see every penny of that go to people who actually fucking need it.
Okay, if I can just make one calm point real quickly. My whole issue is this. If when people act like jerks in the name of religion, it's like when Christians do it, you're more than willing to call them on it. It's
Sure.
like, but no, like, okay, Fred Phelps, okay, sorry. When he acts like a jerk, you're willing to call him on it. It's
Yes.
legal for him to protest funerals, but it's being a jerk about it. But if Muslims do something, it's always with the best intentions.
See,
and it's
okay,
always a
okay.
good thing.
Hang on.
Okay,
Let me stop you right there. Let me stop you right there, and
You've
I'll
never
tell you.
criticized.
No.
For anything.
You are
That is
so, you
bullshit.
are so completely. You're done, by the way.
Well.
I'm going to put you on hold so you can hear me ream your ass out because, first of all, I go after Fred Phelps when he's wrong, and I support his ass completely when he's right, like when they slashed his tires and wouldn't replace him the other day. And when Islam and clerics and Muslims go out and do something, I oppose that as well, and I support them when they're right. This is what you don't seem to understand, that I don't care whether or not they were building a mosque or a bomb factory. If it's legal, it's legal. And you go after the illegal things in a different way. And for you to pretend that atheists are somehow taking it easy on Islam, when, for example, Sam Harris just the other day made the brilliant point of saying that we only talk about these things with relation to Islam because there's no Reform Judaism version of Islam, and we don't
Right.
talk about them with regard to Amish and stuff, that we recognize a demonstrable threat here, and that we talk about it. It's just...
And here's the distinction that you
listening
are
to?
deliberately obfuscating, and this is where you are being deliberately dishonest. You first try to make your analogy to Fred Phelps. You say, well, Fred Phelps does something, you call him on it. Then, when you shift over to talking about 9/11 and the mosque and what have you, you go from an individual to a group. You go from Fred Phelps to Muslims. And that is where the dishonesty in your whole attempt to make an analogy is happening.
That's it.
Okay?
Yep.
One group of Muslims associated with a terrorist organization committed an act of war 9 years ago. Bad shit. We were certainly all over it when it happened. We were very critical, and we have been, if you know anything at all about us, and if you've read the blog, if you've listened to this program, we were coming down on the Taliban and the Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden and all the rest of it. We were coming down on those guys for all of their crap and their oppression of women and what have you long before September 11th, 01.
The problem here is that you have uncritically accepted claims, and when we don't object to what somebody supposedly said, you think that we're taking it easy on them, when instead we're just not idiotic enough to buy into what we're being fed and go around spreading lies about people. The guy did not threaten violence. He talked about the real possibility of violence. There's a difference, and if you don't recognize that, that's part of the problem. And it would be asinine for me to come on here and start saying the stuff that you think I should be saying. And if you don't like it, don't watch.
Yes.
I don't mind.
And again, to claim that we are not willing to criticize a certain group, we are willing to attack a group of Muslims who do a thing.
No. And that's the other thing. It's not we're attacking a group. We're attacking ideas and actions that people take.
Let's say an organization.
Yeah.
One Muslim organization And then when an entirely different Muslim organization decides they want to build a mosque, the fact that we can make a distinction between those two organizations, even though they both do claim the same religion,
Yeah.
and the motives between those two organizations, now if you have some sort of evidence that, this group building Park 51 is exactly the same group, who, the Al Qaeda, they're directly affiliated with Al Qaeda, and I know that there are a lot of conspiracy theories trying to claim that. But don't come here with some bullshit saying that, oh, well, we're not willing to go after Muslims because you just haven't been paying attention to us, if that's what you think.
Or anybody else. I mean,
and your argument is...
Look at every one of the top atheists. All they've been doing lately is going after Muslims. And
Yeah.
you guys are afraid to go after Islam. Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
Next.
Again, just do a search for Islam on the Atheist Experience blog and look at some of the stuff I've written.
Yeah, next.
So anyway, next.
We got Kevin in New York. How are you? And sorry for the wait.
That's good to get riled up, though.
Dylan.
Kevin?
Yeah, hi.
How you doing?
Sorry for the wait.
That's all right. Enjoying the conversation.
Well, all right.
That makes one of us.
Oh, I was enjoying it very much.
I hate lies.
Well,
And I
so
hate idiots.
I love calling out lies, though.
Anyway, so go ahead, Kevin.
What have you got for us, sir?
I just want to say I believe I can prove the existence of God.
Oh, boy.
Bring it.
All right. Basically, you have sexual reproduction. I mean, you have the scientific fact that all life can only come from life.
No, you don't.
Life, anyway.
No, you don't have that as a scientific fact.
Yeah, we do. It's called the law of biogenesis, actually.
It's not. It's not what you're saying that all life can only come from life. It's that all we've observed is life coming from life. Abiogenesis, by the way, is a field of study that has demonstrated scientifically in the lab that life can come from non-living matter.
It actually can't. That's not true.
Well,
okay.
so
believe me, I've done the research. I've been on both sides of the fence.
Okay, give us a site for that. Then.
Hang on, because I'd ask you how on earth you can baldly assert that when people like John Oros have demonstrated that it does happen. I mean, and not just the Uri Miller experiments, which had a different atmosphere from Earth, but still demonstrated that you get the building blocks of life from non-living material. But Oros has done work with this as well. We know that it's at least possible. And not only that, but we know that it had to happen.
Yeah, and life is, life is chemistry, really. It's just...
Actually, the Miller-Urey experiment didn't really prove anything. All it said, like you said, it proved that building blocks of life can be formed, but
what's that you mean?
That's like saying you got a pile of bricks, and that makes...
No, it's not like saying that. No. It's not like we ended up with a bunch of Legos and nobody to put them together. We're talking about self-replicating DNA, or RNA in that case.
Yeah.
That has never been proven in any lab experiment ever.
Okay. I disagree with you, but however, even if it hadn't, it doesn't mean...
I disagree with something that's pretty much blatant fact.
Well,
Kevin, even if it had never been proven, which is an assertion of yours that I disagree with, it doesn't prove your point. See, just because we haven't demonstrated that life can come from non-living material doesn't mean that it can't.
Well, if you go by logic, let's see, we have so many...
If you go by logic, Socrates was a cat. Come on. It's what science works on evidence, okay? Now,
right.
And just because we don't have particular...
Evidence suggests that life can only come from life. It
doesn't. No, Kevin, that's the swan fallacy. There are no black swans because all we've ever seen are white swans. It's a demonstrable logical fallacy, and if it's the building block of your argument for the existence of God, you already lost.
Okay, but listen to this.
All right.
How you can prove... You say the burden of proof is on me, but actually it's on you.
No, it's not.
Oh, really?
Realistically, because you're making a superficial, or not superficial, I don't know the word for it, but...
We're saying that we don't believe in your invisible man in the sky.
Saying that, the burden of proof isn't on you because you say God doesn't exist.
No, Kevin, you're not getting it. If I say to you, God doesn't exist, I have a burden of proof. I've said this 1,000 times. However, you're asserting that God exists, and I'm saying I don't believe you. Where's your evidence? You have the burden of proof because you're asserting a claim. And by way, Kevin, in an attempt to demonstrate your case that you have the burden of proof for, you begin constructing a logical argument. And you begin with the premise that life can only come from life. And I reject your premise.
Also, you started this call when you called in saying, I can demonstrate that God... So you pretty much declared yourself to have the burden of proof and the proof.
I didn't call you and say, I can prove to you that there is no God.
I mean, you called up and you said, I've got some proof to give you. So, at least in this conversation, you've got the burden of proof because you declared yourself to be the man with the proof. All right?
But anybody...
Stating my proof, you just...
we did.
Because I did give you a chance.
We gave you a chance, but we explained why, in our opinion,
it's not
your premise was you were working from a false premise.
It's not an opinion.
Yeah.
Your premise has not been demonstrated, and your assumption that life can only come from life is an inductive argument. You've used an inductive argument to reach a premise, and it is a demonstrably flawed one in the same way that the black swan fallacy is.
And in any event, if life can only come from life, then you were left with either, two possibilities.
Biological life, yeah.
Yeah, biological life.
God's biologically alive.
Yeah. Then what that means is if we are here as the result of a deity, then you are going to have to go into detail about the mechanisms by which this deity created life. You simply cannot say, well, then this must lead to a deity. No. You have to you have to be ready and prepared to explain the process.
Yeah, you're trying to go from a purported effect to its cause by way of nonsense.
And this is going to require you not merely to propose a God as the answer, but you now have to explain this God. You have to explain, if this God is alive, because life can only come from life, then how is this God alive? And what sort of being is this? Is he bigger than a bread box? Is he alive in the way we understand life? Does he have metabolic processes? Does he take dumps? Does he eat? Does he fart? Does he sleep? Does he have to clean out his earwax? What sort of being is this?
Well, no, we don't necessarily. Right? You don't necessarily have to know all that.
I'm exaggerating to make the point. But the thing is, at a basic level, you have to explain in what way this being is alive. See, so you're really opening yourself up for a lot more than you think you are. I think that you're just being able to say, well, because science hasn't proven life from non-life, therefore God. As the default. And you seem to think that that's really kind of all you have to do. And no, I think that there's a lot more detail to what you're going to have to...
Yes, and it is, by the way, an argument from ignorance. Mm-hmm. As we mentioned earlier, where you say that because science has not proved that this is the case, therefore my assumption that it's not the case is valid. Mm-hmm. It's an argument from ignorance. Sorry.
And it also gets you to infinite regress, because if God's alive, then some living thing must have... so on. Anyway. It's a big mess.
So many things wrong. We've got, is it Hani and Sydney?
Yeah, g'day guys, how you going?
Good, how are you?
Fine, sorry to keep you waiting for so long.
Oh, no, that's okay. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, very clearly.
Oh, great, okay. Just want to say I love the show, of course. You guys have a little, there's a lot of feedback coming through.
Yeah, try and make it quick. We're having mic problems.
Yeah. You sound good to us.
I'm in a bit of a slightly difficult situation. I attend a youth centre in Sydney. It's a Christian-based youth centre, and we deal with a lot of kids who are sort of being kicked out of home, who are having some problems in their life. But I've also been given the opportunity to give a couple of talks on critical thinking and things like that. And I'm a recent atheist myself, thanks to you guys. Something has come up though where the issue is if getting some of these kids to begin some sort of critical thought, and they find out that or they bring up questions and they start to leave their so-called Christian indoctrination, there's a bit of a problem where some of these kids could become suicidal, and that's been addressed to me as an issue by one of the head people who run the centre.
Why would they?
Yeah. Did they explain why they thought that was a possibility?
Well, yeah, because a lot of the times with the indoctrination there is this hope that the children will become supermen, so to speak, after they die. And if this hope is taken away, then their only hope, that being God, would be taken away, and that could sort of threaten the life of the youth, so to speak.
Okay. I don't know that that's necessarily all that valid a threat to worry about, but probably the best thing that I could say to sort of put your mind at ease about some of this is that, the transition from believer to unbeliever is not really like a light switch. It's a process by which the individual begins to evaluate the ideas in his head, starts thinking about it. Well, maybe, it's this process over time. Now, I can see, I can imagine a situation where if you had someone who was this devotee of something, and they had based their entire life and they'd invested their entire sense of self-worth and happiness in believing this thing, right? And then suddenly it was all at once shown to them to be false, and they were deluded, and so this would naturally throw imagine someone coming home from work one day and finds their loving spouse in bed with someone else, right? That's sudden. So oh Jesus, right? I mean, that's a massive, horrible.
Yeah.
That's a cataclysmic sudden event. But yeah, that would make you depressed, change your whole outlook on things, it would probably make you suicidal, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But when we're talking about going from believer to unbeliever or what have you, it's not usually like that. It's a much more,
There are, though, people, and I talked to Marlene Winnell at the Texas Free Thought Convention, and there's a little bit of from her in the podcast, the special podcast I did from that. There are a lot of people who suffer serious depression and other issues. She's actually dubbed it religious trauma syndrome, where when they no longer, when they acknowledge their own disbelief, they've essentially are in a position where they've lost their family, their support group, their entire social network, and this is potentially traumatizing. And then there's also the issue of people who, in addition to rejecting the theistic claims and acknowledging their atheism, also buy into existential claims, about life is now meaningless and why not end it all type of thing. I think that the issue here is complicated. I agree with Martin. I don't think it's incredibly likely that this is going to be a big thing. But those people who do find that they're suffering like this, they need to be recognized and counseled and assisted by professionals in some cases. And in many cases, it's just a matter of giving them additional information, helping them recognize, for those people who bought into some other type of nonsense, that in fact, life is what it is, and the reward is the living, and living till tomorrow is preferable to dying today, even if 100 years from now, I won't exist and none of this will matter to me. It's like the example that I've used before of I have to eat. I could stop eating voluntarily, and some people would suggest that I should do that for at least a little while. But I could stop eating because I could say, if I eat this sandwich, my body's just going to use up the parts that it can use. It's just going to need more food in a handful of hours, and I'm going to have to get rid of the waste material that I'm not using. And ultimately, in the grand scheme of things, this was just all a big waste because I just got to keep doing it again. And someday I'm not going to eat anyway, so why don't I just stop eating? I think that kind of becomes obvious. The meaning of life, or the meaning of eating, is the benefit that you get while it's going on and for some time after, in the case of eating, while your body's processing your food. But I don't think, I'm with Martin, I don't think this is anything that we need to be terrified of, that there's going to be an epidemic of people committing suicide simply because, someone exposed a delusion to them.
Although if it did happen, it wouldn't be, as you said, from the loss of belief. It would be from the loss of friends, family members, the esteem of people who, equate, religious belief with goodness. It would be that loss of structure. But, you can be there. There are other folks around. There's a wonderful Sydney Atheist group out there. Hi, gang. who are very supportive. So
there's nothing about atheism that necessarily leads to suicide, and so therefore I don't think that you bear a great deal of responsibility for telling people what you honestly believe is the truth and convincing them of false things. If anything, if we're going to point blame at somewhere for people who end up killing themselves because they've lost this delusion, the blame needs to be pointed where at the delusion that started this. It's like convincing somebody you're a millionaire, you're a millionaire, you're a millionaire, you're a millionaire, and then they get all hyped up and excited, and they start spending, whatever money, and they go check their bank account, and you go, I was just kidding. I mean,
it's like a big massive letdown.
Yeah, it's not the truth that caused this; it is the lie that caused this.
Yes. It's amazing how powerful the indoctrination can be. I mean, I know one of the guys. He said to me, he goes, if it wasn't for God in my life, I would have killed myself already.
But they're taught to think that way. Again, a perfect comparison would be to situations with kids coming out as gay, right? It's not the awakening to their sexuality that throws them into depression and suicidal thoughts. It's being bombarded with hate and anger and you're a horrible, evil, hellbound sinner that they get from other people as a result of that. So again, it's the truth will never, rarely. Well, I won't say never. The truth about yourself rarely hurts you. It's the lies that people tell to hurt you.
Agreed. Well, thanks for taking the call, guys.
Sure.
You've got a growing group of lovers here in Sydney.
All right.
And if you ever need a new home to come and visit, we've got our first female atheist prime minister, which we're pretty proud of. So,
That's
welcome here anytime, guys.
All right, thanks so much.
I do want to come someday. It's a long way to fly.
Unfortunately, there's like almost no time at all left. And so, Jordan, you there?
Yeah.
I can't even let you get to your question, but the question that as it's typed in about your mom addressing your arguments, saying that her beliefs comfort her.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. The last response applies to that, but also I'd point out that it's somebody could say that a bottle of scotch or shooting up heroin comforts them.
Right.
If they care more about what's comforting than what's true, that's an issue they're actually going to have to sort out. I think the best thing is probably to point out the benefits of understanding the truth as best you can. And I apologize, but that's actually all we have time for.
And show how positive your life is, even as an unbeliever to her.
On the new
and that she can have
show.
that too.
But there's a list of everybody else. As a reminder, we'll be at Threadgills here shortly, and we look forward to seeing you again next week. Where Jen will be on? No.
Yes. Yeah.
Jen shook her head. All right. We'll see you all then. Thanks a lot.